Okay, so it's a tradition of Big Data Spain to gather every day of the conference some leaders that discuss for a very short time, 20 minutes or so, ideas, topics that are of relevance for everyone. You can ask questions. We will try to moderate them via Twitter. And today it's a pleasure to welcome José Borja Tomé, which many of you have already listened to in his previous talk. Also Paco, who is probably the best well-known speaker at Big Data Spain, and he's joining us this year as well. He's speaking after this roundtable. Holden Karau, I don't think anybody needs introduction of Holden Karau, apart from being a participant committer, an incredible leader and an evangelist of big data. He has moved from IBM to Google, and I would like you to welcome the three of them, and also Óscar, Méndez, the CEO at Stratio. Thank you very much. So guys, thank you for coming today. Basically, you know, this is a very open format. We kickstart with a single topic. Óscar will moderate. Please interrupt each other. We never had fights so far, but we will try to prevent that from happening also.
Okay.
I'm very glad today because this is like a very good range of representatives from the industry, from institutions to not startups anymore, large startups, corporations, O'Reilly. So it kind of look like very, very diverse, and I think it's enriching, all right? So first question for you, Óscar, and maybe you can take it over, is how do you think big data platforms are evolving thanks to the advent or the mainstream advent of artificial intelligence tooling? Is it, do you see more development into the predictive analytics? Is it just a new toy that we are using for developing new applications? What do you think is changing right now, this situation?
Okay, I think, well, first of all, thanks everybody for coming and to stay in this roundtable. I think this is a subject to talk between all of us because maybe it is the core of the discussion. In my opinion, artificial intelligence, like with all the technologies, has arrived to the peak, to the hype. So we are in the hype of artificial intelligence. Everything is artificial intelligence. If you are talking with anyone in the street, he will talk about artificial intelligence. So it is not really easy when you are in the hype of a technology to know what is real artificial intelligence, how the companies are using it, and what is it good for. And this is, for me, the issue. How are evolving the platforms to artificial intelligence? Well, in our opinion, artificial intelligence is a combination, and we have had three, I think that 3 winters for artificial intelligence. So this is not new. We were in the artificial intelligence hype like 30 years ago. Everything was going to be artificial intelligence. Then it died. It came again. It died. And this time, is it here to stay? My opinion is yes. Why? Because artificial intelligence in this actually currently is giving value or providing value, real value to the companies and to the market. So I think that it is here to stay, to evolve, and to lead the companies. But the uses the companies are doing about artificial intelligence are, most of the companies, are very marketing-like. For example, artificial intelligence is not a virtual assistant. A virtual assistant is something that has a very stupid questions and answer system that is learning or trained by a people and is artificial, but is not intelligent. So virtual assistants, it depends if they are artificial intelligent or not. It depends of the system that is behind the foundation. So artificial intelligence in the companies, most of them are using it because they want to have the stamp of, I am using artificial intelligence. But artificial intelligence is a lot more. It will provide a lot of value to the companies that are using it well. And in my opinion, you have to build sensors, cameras, integrations with machines, all this to get data, customer data, machine data, to have volumes of data, go to deep learning, and to provide real value. Sorry it take too long. Please, your opinion. I don't know, Paco or...
Certainly, I agree. I think a lot of the proof is that we see now consumer products and services which are very much powered, even if it's on the back end. If it's not totally transparent to the consumers, there is still so much more value being added, as you said, by AI and by machine learning at scale. And I think that this is only going to continue now that it's become part of economics, it's become part of our infrastructure, the expectation, it's becoming part of transportation and daily life. And I still feel that the platforms, the big data platforms, the practices of data science, much of what you spoke about, the issues today in the keynote, these are so foundational. I mean, if you don't have these in place, AI does not follow.
I think we also see a lot of the big data systems are having to reevaluate how they're structured to actually support AI. Because even if you have a wonderful big data system in place and you've actually gotten rid of your barriers, a lot of the systems are very, like, I think in technology way too often, but like very JVM focused. And a lot of the really cool tools are being built in GPUs and other things which are more difficult to access from the JVM. And so I think one of the signs that it is a really big legitimate change is you can see all of the people who are building the big data tools are having to adopt systems to better support AI. So if it was a flash in the pan, they would probably just do kind of a hack job so that it looked like it worked, but there's some really foundational work happening to support this.
Awesome.
Yes, from a government perspective, of course, I agree with all what you've said. There's one more point, and it's how you use AI in government. And we have to be careful how we use it because it's connected with something I said before. We need to make sure that what our systems do can be explained to society.
Yeah.
That's sometimes difficult because when you think about a system which is self-learning, then you need to be able to explain to society that this system is being set this way so that it's going to give good results to society. So I think we are a bit behind some initiatives in companies. Sometimes tax administrations have been in an OECD last year, a meeting, international one, with all the countries, and they were talking about AI, and most of what was just chatbots with no artificial intelligence behind it. Because really, it's not so easy to overcome this kind of issues. But I expect it's going to grow, as you were saying. Also, understanding people and all that is critical for us.
So I think some people call this white box AI, right? Mm-hmm. The idea is that unlike the black boxes that we just feed our data into and we get a model we can't interpret out of, for many use cases, it's very important to actually be able to explain to people the decisions we've made. It's maybe less important in a self-driving car, unless, knock on wood, something bad happens. But if you're going to make decisions that impact giving people money or investigating people, you better be able to figure out what's going on.
Exactly.
Certainly.
Yeah, I agree because one of the barriers to adopt artificial intelligence in the companies and in the organizations is the regulation. For example, for regulation, you cannot use black boxes because then you could be doing something that is not politically correct because you are taking into account sex or race or whatever. So black boxes for algorithms and artificial intelligence by European Central Bank and the regulators are not allowed. So we are moving to these white boxes in which you can understand why this decision was taken and how it's moving. And this is one of the problems and the challenges we have to solve, because a lot of the algorithms, advanced algorithms we are using are black box because they learn, and then once they learn, you cannot know how they are deciding in some way. So this is not an easy task. Anyway, how, if you compare any digital expert like Google, Facebook, Amazon, with the physical big companies like any Fortune 500 from GE, which is investing a lot, to Walmart, to other companies that are not investing or moving so fast, how advanced they are, what are they using, where they are, and where these ones, how they are working, how they are moving. Do you think it's fast enough? The gap is very big. How do you see this situation?
You know, I think it's interesting that over the past few years, there have been many more articles about the origins and thinking of, say, AWS. How did this come about? Because originally it was very closed. And I worked a lot with AWS long ago, early on, and just the fact that from a corporate level, very high level, they were thinking about services, and they were thinking long-term strategy of how, by their approach to introducing services, they were actually putting a stake in the ground that would be very hard for anyone else to catch up to. And similarly with Google, they've been thinking years ahead of how to have labeled data sets that maybe seemed a little strange. Why is this a priority? But now that we have deep learning and all these applications available, they've actually had almost barriers to entry because of this strategic thinking about data and services. Much like you were saying earlier, I mean, I think we have to look ahead. We can't just respond quarter to quarter. And that's my sense of these companies. What differentiates is who's really looking ahead, 10 years, 20 years. You have to.
Yep.
So I have a different take, but I respect yours as well. I think things have actually narrowed a lot. There was a time when the big company tools were so far and away better than all of the tools that were available in the open source that fundamentally the open source tools were just playing catch up to the papers from the large companies. But I think this is no longer the case. I think we see, certainly there's still places where we do this, but I think there's actual good innovation happening outside of these big companies, which they're having to react to and pick up. And so I think it's less of a small set of leaders, and it's now much more open. But of course I'm biased. I think open source is amazing. So, you know, take it for what you will.
Well, sorry to jump, but I think that Paco completely agree about this because he's one of the early adopters for Spark, for Mesos, for all the open source technologies. And I agree also about that because, for example, there were a time where Google Borg, to put an example, was unique. You didn't have any system, any PAS or infrastructure manager to compete like Google Borg was managing 10 million computers worldwide. But now you have Mesos, which is open. Airbnb is using Mesos, Mesosphere, Twitter, and it is as good as the systems they are using in Google, and it is evolving with Kubernetes and integrating, and Google is pushing and also building Kubernetes in an open way. So I think that open source movement right now has made this catch up with the big ones. These ones are also helping open source because, in my opinion, they are competing in between. So to move people to Google Cloud, I will liberate TensorFlow, and then to move people to Microsoft Azure, or I will liberate some Yahoo or Microsoft algorithms. So this competition is also helping the open source technologies to not be 1 or 2 years behind the secret weapons they are developing in the laboratories. And this is really very cool and very interesting because we can compete much equal to any company right now. So,
yes, I think there's a question about technologies, but also about what data they are gathering. The bigger, the easier it is for them to gather data. And then when you have more data, you have a competitive advantage, which is something it's difficult to compete against that. For governments, it's different. We just ask for the data we want. It's easier. But then using the tools, maybe we're behind. The thing is, I think one important thing is personalization and how each individual person is being identified and treated. I think it's one of the key issues. And in that case, I see big corporations are better each time in that. And what I feel, I was saying before, for tax administration, even for government, it's a bit tricky. Because if you want to, imagine we would decide that we would do personalized actions for each taxpayer. Because we decide who they are, and they have debt, and we know that if we do this to him, this specific person, it would work better than the other one. Maybe it's just the kind of letter we send, or maybe anything. But still, he could ask, why are you sending me this letter different from that other person? Which is the law that says that you can do that? It's the kind of things that the issues we have in government.
Okay. We were talking also about open source, how open source for big data, for artificial intelligence is helping. And I will ask, not a very easy to answer question. What do you think, what is your opinion between technologies like Spark and Hadoop, MapReduce, Hive, Pig, Impala? They replace, they complement, they are better, they are not better, they are better for some use cases. What's your opinion?
You want?
Come on, Paco, be a brave one.
Oh, okay. Yes, I think that we've seen some generations of the open source stack grow. And, you know, Hadoop is a very large ecosystem at this point. It's not just a thing. Definitely, there's some competition between these different approaches. But I think that the bigger question, I think the bigger narrative is that hardware is evolving rapidly, and almost too rapidly for the software stacks to keep up. And so I think that all of these are somewhat at risk. A lot what Holden, what she said earlier, is that even the open source projects have to really struggle to keep up with what's happening with hardware right now. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I would say that for a more direct answer, that there's a combination of definitely competing and complementing. I think at the end of the day, general purpose systems tend to win, but there are still occasions where you need a special purpose system. And I think that's been a lot of Spark's success is it's a very good general purpose system, but there will still be times when you need a special purpose system. So, you know, obviously keep using Spark because that indirectly gets me paid money somehow. But, you know, don't just go and replace everything with Spark and expect it to be perfect.
Yes, I would say as a government we try to be agnostic. In our case, we try to use whatever we have for the cases which are the best. We are not quite tied to anything, not even open source or not. We love open source, it's easy to use, it's simpler for us to acquire, and it's easier to explain what we're doing with it. But we are agnostic. Different groups in our teams use different technologies. It's like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think I will try to give my opinion briefly. Too. I agree. There is a combination. The combination is the winner, because we should talk about the use cases. For this use case, which is the best processing engine I can use. So if for that use case you can solve it because it is batch or it's interactive with Hive, with Pig, or with Spark SQL, okay, then you have to decide according the people, the knowledge you have, the platform, and so on. If, on the other hand, you are doing a use case in which you are managing something in real time in milliseconds, then the Spark streaming window is maybe not good enough. Maybe it's better to use Flink or whatever. So combination will be the perfect match. But the only problem I see about combination is simplification. If you combine, you make systems and the development more complex. So if possible, if you have a technology that can cover this and this and this use case, don't use or don't add another technology because you want to play or to create a laboratory because you are going to complicate things in your company. Just ask, for this use case, the technology I have is as best as other one? Yes. No? I need another one, then put that technology inside. But it's the use case that will lead the technology that you have to use.
I think maybe another dimension of that is that learning curves are accelerating, and for all of these technologies we talk about, as they become more complex, the learning curves grow. And this puts a lot of burden on people to have to be able to keep up with all this variety of different technologies, keep up with learning as new point releases come out every few months. So I think you have to look at the human factor of how much continual learning is really being placed on people.
Yep. So I was really intrigued about your answer about hardware. So Paco, what do you think, how do you see hardware is evolving and the systems and so on, and how they are going to impact in the technologies we're using and in this big data and artificial intelligence evolution for the companies?
Certainly.
What is your opinion?
Certainly. For instance, there was a use case I worked on almost 10 years? Almost 10 years ago.
Well, it is strange because you are 18 years old, so...
Yeah, exactly. But it was a large instance of Hadoop in the cloud, very early instance of Hadoop on AWS. And the data rates were in terabytes, certain algorithms. Recently, I went back and I ran that on my laptop in Python. It ran faster. And it's been 9 years, and of course technology evolves very quickly, but still, it used to take a whole cluster, and now it runs on my laptop. So I look at things like natural language processing and how that feeds into AI, and there are a lot of techniques that we did maybe even 3 years ago, which were shortcuts. And now because of the hardware evolving, we don't have to take those shortcuts. The data quality improves, the feature, what goes into feature engineering and then what feeds into deep learning is much substantially improved. And I think we'll see that kind of evolution of hardware having impact on the results that come out.
What's your opinion about hardware systems evolution? Because Google is like very distributed, huge systems.
Yeah. I spend most of my time thinking about distributed systems, but I think it's important to understand also that there's a bunch of things that are changing at the same time. We see a lot more use of specialized hardware than we did before, right? We now have distributed systems of specialized hardware, and before we were thinking mostly in terms of distributed systems of commodity hardware. Right. And this really changes from a scheduling perspective, the kinds of things you have to keep in mind. And it also, I think it's going to change our formats a lot. And I think this actually, hopefully it ends up being transparent to the end developer, but it never is. But ideally, we can hide enough of it. But I think we're going to have to start changing things so that it's easier to move between tools in Python, tools in the JVM, and tools on the GPU, like written in CUDA or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think we're gonna have to change a lot of our core sort of formats to match where the hardware is going. And that's going to be kind of painful.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to trick other people into doing it if anyone wants to work on some open source software.
Looking for volunteers.
Yeah. No, not joking.
Yeah, we really are.
So I don't know, my question maybe for you is a little bit different. How do you think governmental organizations are moving or evolving about different types of hardware, specialized hardware like innovation with JPUs, doing special types of algorithms and so on, and also moving to open source technologies and all this. Are they adopting? Are they not adopting? Is your big data system more still in a closed product, open product? What's the evolution you are seeing?
Well, I don't know if I have enough perspective of what is happening in government, generally speaking, but I feel that the trend is, of course, open source is important, and it will continue being even increasingly important, and that's because of different reasons. The first reason is that it's increasingly important for society, so that is a fact. Other reasons is that it's more explainable to society when you're using open source, and also open systems allow you to know better what you're doing and change things faster. It's easier for us to make acquisitions in the public sector. Acquisitions of software need to be done by special procedures, which are quite complex, take time, need to explain a lot of things. And if you just want to start a project with any new tool, which is open source, then you just get it and you start to use it. And maybe it's not about the cost. You can have a very big budget, but it's hard to sometimes use that budget in that way. So that's a trend. And I would say that's more a trend than using specialized hardware, at least in what I see. But it's maybe government is so big that you have so many specialized agencies dealing with many different kind of situations. And of course, also universities are many universities, unless at least in Spain, are governmental. And there, of course, you have other needs.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So another trend is cloud.
Definitely.
Well, it's not a trend. It is
Reality.
a very old story. But how do you think cloud evolution? I mean, do you think big banks, telecoms, insurance, retailers are going to move all the data, all the infrastructure to cloud? Part of that, hybrid. Some will go by sectors, purely cloud, private plus public. What's your opinion? What are you seeing?
Apologies, Paco. We have 3 minutes on something, so maybe we can have like a short answer. Apologies for the interruption.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
A quick review.
Quick, I'll go out on a ledge and I'll say that there's been a lot of resistance over the years to move many enterprise business operations into the cloud because of security concerns and privacy concerns. I think that we're going to reach a point where that flips. And I think what will happen, it won't be gradual. It will be a punctuated equilibrium where we begin to recognize that it's actually more secure and better privacy and better auditing by being in the cloud than not. So I think, I don't know how soon, but somewhere in the next few years, probably.
I hope you're right.
I'm not so sure it's going to happen so fast for government,
Yeah.
at least for your tax data. But maybe, yeah, maybe.
Do you think it will be pure or hybrid?
That's a good question. Certainly a lot of hybrid.
Okay. So I think, Ruben, we can go to some questions, or?
Yes, there is one very interesting on Twitter about the GDPR. Maybe, well, probably Holden and Paco, maybe you are not that aware. Here in Europe, we have this European regulation that is kicking in May. So it's about personal data protection. I want to think that the European authorities are benchmarking the German standards of data protection and also trying to regulate a little bit the export of data, personal data in the European territory over to the US. So Andy Petrella is discussing this tomorrow. Please note that on your schedule, because he explained it to me for dummies, explaining that if an insurance company denies you a credit or a loan, personal loan, they have to produce not the algorithm, but the weighting of the factors that made that decision come through. So if they are saying, no, you cannot access this credit, they have to prove how it happened. And the penalties and the fines for not complying with that procedures are very, very remarkable indeed. And I mean, also public governments and institutions are subject to this new regulation. Of course, in the US, things are a bit different. I would like to pass this question over to you. We are discussing this tomorrow, but maybe you can also provide some insights into how do you think GDPR is affecting your way of working in the next few months?
Yes. Yes, of course, it's going to affect us. Not so much, because really we have all these issues in our minds all the time. Because it's not that we need to stick to regulation, we need to comply with it, but we need to think also what we are doing when we are doing things. So it's a concern for us. You know, we have, as I've said, so lots of data in our systems that we are very careful with what we do with them and how society can understand what is happening. So it's just we need to check that what we are doing is more or less correct. But I would say we'll change, but not so intensively.
Okay. From I don't know. Of course, you just arrived to Google. It's hard to come up with.
I should avoid
insights.
answering regulatory questions. I like being employed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
Paco,
I
maybe you
understand
have.
that I could be maybe about this a more direct opinion. For us as a product, big data and artificial intelligence product company, GDPR and regulatory are in fact our best friend. Why? Because the normal technologies and products the companies are using don't comply. So it is a really good push to move companies to new technologies that can comply with that diversity of data, data protection. If you want to move as a customer your data from this company, you can ask, and they will have to export all your data as a customer to this other company. The companies don't have the technology to do that. So for us, it's fantastic. But as a European citizen, for this I am really very aggressive, I don't like it. I think it's a big mistake. It's too strong. And it is a big limitation for European companies to compete with US companies or other Chinese or any other companies in the world. Severe limitation. Okay. So you are overcomplicated things. Of course, citizens' data and privacy is key, and you should protect that, but also trying to help those companies to have the same competitive advantage they have in other countries. So, as normal, when politicians make technological or rules that affect technology, they don't understand the consequences.
Well, that's a very good feedback indeed. So, unfortunately, we're out of time. Please send your questions directly to us with the hash BDS17 or directly to these panelists. So thank you very much. I would appreciate a lot if you please clap very hard for these four panelists.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please remember that during the whole conference, serving times are spread across the schedule, meaning that you don't have to rush out of the theater to grab a cup of coffee because, for instance, lunch break lasts for almost 2 hours. So you will always be able to, not miss anything. Thank you.